On the biggest stage in the world, FanDuel's changing the game because sometimes your player gets subbed off and your bet goes with them. Not anymore. With FanDuel's Super Sub, if your player's subbed out, your bet stays in. That's right. If your player leaves the match, your bet continues on with the substitute. So you're still in it until the final whistle. Visit FanDuel.com. Get started now. Let there be goals this summer on FanDuel.
21 plus select states for Kansas in affiliation with Kansas Star Casino. 18 plus DCKYWY. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. 1-800-MY-RESET. 888-789-7777. Visit ccpg.org/chat. Connecticut. Visit mdgamblinghelp.org. Maryland. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org. Call 800-327-5050. Massachusetts. Call 877-8-HOPE-NY. Text HOPE-NY in New York. Call 877-770-7867. Louisiana.
Visit FanDuel.com. Get started now. Let there be goals this summer on FanDuel.
Listen, all you New Yorkers. Excuse me. Taxi.
Okay, man, we're looking around.
This is the 77 WABC minicast.
This is the Stone Zone with Roger Stone.
People love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, get in the zone. It's the Stone Zone. Here's Roger Stone.
You are now diving into the deep end of the Stone Zone. And if you're a political junkie like me, you're focused on South Carolina today, where there are two big nationally followed primaries. The most important one, of course, is where Senator Lindsey Graham faces off against Pastor Mark Lynch for the U.S. Senate seat. The other one is a race in which fiery pro-Trump Congresswoman Nancy Mace faces Trump-endorsed South Carolina Lieutenant Governor Pamela Abbott and longtime South Carolina Attorney General Alan Wilson. The thing to remember about South Carolina is that their Republican primary is what is known as an open primary, meaning one does not have to be a registered Republican to vote in that particular election. One can be a Republican, a Democrat, or neither one, someone of no party at all. And that affords an enormous advantage to Lindsey Graham. Many of my Trump-supporting friends would like to see Lindsey Graham be defeated tonight. That wouldn't upset me either, although I think because of a very large crossover vote, there's not much competition for the Democrat nomination, the state being overwhelmingly now a Republican bastion. The odds still with Lindsey Graham. Saw the senator in Washington, D.C. in the Four Seasons Hotel about, 3 weeks ago. He was so drunk he could barely stand up. I do recall once at Mar-a-Lago, I guess it was last summer, when I went to an outdoor reception by the swimming pool, and my wife was with me, and there was Lindsey Graham holding forth with his back to the pool, maybe 2 feet away from the pool. I guess I got a rather devilish grin on my face. My wife looked at me and said, "Don't even think about it." I knew, of course, that if I tossed the senator into the pool, that the Secret Service would probably not only throw me out immediately, but ban me from Mar-a-Lago for life, which probably wouldn't have been worth it. But I must admit, the idea did cross my mind. It's interesting because South Carolina's open primary has a long tradition. See, in 1964, Democrat Senator J. Strom Thurmond, who had also served as governor of South Carolina, in the middle of his 6-year term, decided to switch parties in order to support Barry Goldwater as the Republican nominee for president. Now, the Senator Thurmond could have just finished out the balance of his 6-year term, the second 3 years of his term, with the R designation after his name, but Thurmond, who was a man of deep principle, insisted that it would be unfair to the voters of South Carolina for him to have been elected as a Democrat and then serve as a Republican. So he insisted on resigning his Senate seat, creating a vacancy, and then running in the Republican primary for the Republican nomination for a new election to win the seat. Of course, tens of thousands of conservative Democrats, something that doesn't exist anymore, crossed over into the then fairly anemic and small South Carolina Republican Party primary to nominate Thurmond, who was then reelected to the U.S. Senate. So the open primary has a long tradition in South Carolina. I'll be glued to the TV tonight to see how this particular race comes out. President Trump has endorsed Pamela Abbott, the current lieutenant governor, as the current governor of South Carolina, and those are probably strong indicators. Nancy Mace is a fiery candidate, but the odds are against her. On the other hand, she is a fighter. We'll be watching these races very carefully. President Donald Trump made history Monday night, becoming the first sitting president ever to attend an NBA Finals game. President Trump appeared at Madison Square Garden for Game 3 between the New York Knicks and the San Antonio Spurs, a major sports moment, as the Knicks have not been in this position for 27 years. That made it even bigger by the presence of the commander-in-chief. The president, long familiar to New York sports fans and once a regular courtside presence at Knicks games, was met with a mix of cheers and boos as he arrived. It is, after all, Manhattan. Inside the arena, some fans booed when he was shown on the Jumbotron during the national anthem, but the moment was later answered by chants of USA from the many New York Patriots in attendance in the audience. NBA Commissioner Adam Silver noted before tip-off that Trump has long been a fixture at Madison Square Garden, saying he used to have courtside seats and was there all the time. Outside the arena, of course, left-wing protesters tried to turn the night political, carrying anti-Trump songs and signs and shouting vulgar chants. But inside, the night belonged to basketball, patriotism, and a president who once again showed no fear as he walked into potentially hostile territory. Security was heightened for the event, with the Knicks organization warning fans ahead of time about strict screening procedures and a no-bag policy. As for the game, there would be no Knicks coronation in New York. The Spurs beat the Knicks 115-111, handing New York its first loss after an incredible 13 straight playoff wins. Perhaps that was some karma for the rude Knicks fans who had the audacity to boo their president, but the Knicks will have a chance to make a commanding 3-1 series lead during the next game at Madison Square Garden on Wednesday. Meanwhile, President Donald Trump has spoken out about the California election robbery. California's slow-motion vote counting is reminding Americans of the disaster of the stolen 2020 presidential election, and President Trump is rightfully once again up in arms. In Los Angeles, Republican Spencer Pratt, who had been leading progressive councilwoman Nithya Raman in the race for the final runoff spot against Mayor Karen Bass, throughout the night, he took off to an early strong position. In fact, Raman even conceded on election night. Then, days after the polls closed, as waves of late-counted mail ballots rolled in from somewhere, Raymond suddenly surged past him by amassing a percentage of support that previously seemed unpredictable. Mathematicians tell me it is actually statistically impossible. By Monday evening, with 93% of the vote counted, Raymond, the radical left city council member, stood at 28.6% compared to Pratt's 25.8%, a swing large enough to erase Pratt's advantage, leaving roughly 22,000 votes between them. Democrat election officials want the public to accept that this is normal, but to Trump supporters, this pattern looks painfully familiar. Republican leads on election nights, followed by days or even weeks of mail ballot shenanigans and counting that move in one direction. The chances of almost 80+% of the late mail ballots being for the radical left city councilwoman are statistically impossible, but we're expected to believe it anyway. California's defenders point to signature checks, chain of custody rules, and equipment testing, all red herrings designed to prevent further scrutiny and investigation into how elections in the Golden State are really run. The state does not have mandated voter ID. In fact, voter ID is specifically illegal. The rolls are notoriously dirty, and why ballot harvesting is rampant, it has been thoroughly documented. This creates a perfect storm, allowing for fraud. Pratt going head-to-head with Karen Bass, the current mayor, would have been a disaster for the political establishment, so they couldn't let that happen. Bass, by the way, says that her two political heroes are Mao Zedong and Fidel Castro, to give you some idea where she stands on the political spectrum. Voters simply cannot trust a system that takes weeks to count ballots and repeatedly replaces these late-breaking results that overwhelmingly benefit Democrats or leftists. President Trump's objection is not an attack on democracy. He's attempting to prevent attacks on democracy from the rigors. A massive federal investigation is needed into these fraudulent results. I hope Attorney General designate Todd Blanche will conduct such an investigation. The media and Kristen Welker of NBC are still reeling from her disastrous clash with President Donald Trump. This is the moment nobody wants to talk about. After 9 years of rallies, press conferences, and taped sit-downs, the press is now boxed into three choices every time Donald Trump sits across from them. And every one of those choices is potentially a nightmare for them. Option 1, keep pressing for evidence. Trump says, all I have to do is look, I listen to people. The anchor then demands court-level sourcing. Trump calls them crooked and walks off. The clip goes viral with Trump as the decisive one and the anchor as the mean-spirited aggressor. Network spent a travel budget to Wisconsin for a segment that in this case ended in 90 seconds. Option 2, accept for the frame and move on. Don't challenge the California election claims. Don't push back on 5 days and no winner. Let dirty elections stand without a follow-up. Audience sees the network validating the narrative. Every future anchor gets the same treatment because it worked. Or option 3, don't take the interview. Refuse to sit down entirely. Trump holds rallies, posts on Truth Social, sets the agenda anyway. Networks lose access, loses the clip, loses the audience. We traveled all the way to Wisconsin becomes impossible to say. The story becomes media too afraid to interview the president. So let that one sink in. There is no option 4. There is no clean exit. There is no we are right to ask the questions, and he answered it. The media is showing a president who got a little bit angry in the rain and walked off from a barn roof interview in Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin. They're not showing you that every path forward for the press leads to the same outcome. Trump controls the frame, the clip, and the story. In this particular exchange, Welker yet again insisted that there is absolutely, positively no evidence of election fraud in the 2020 election, which is, of course, on the face of it, absurd at this point. There's not enough time in this program to go through all of the evidence of fraud, but just the statistical anomalies of, once again, in 3 states at 3 o'clock in the morning, 300,000 paper ballots that in Michigan at least and in Pennsylvania had never been folded in half and therefore never really mailed, showing up at the same time, pulling Joe Biden ahead, just one of the many examples. The other outrageous claim is that there's no evidence that January 6th was a setup, and specifically no evidence that police officers from the Capitol Hill Police Office or the FBI actually motioned individual protesters into the Capitol. When anybody can go online to virtually any of the on-site social media platforms and find videos that show exactly that. The big lie continues. The media will never give up, repeating over and over what has been thoroughly and completely disproved. Meanwhile, liberals are up in arms after a new State Department data has shown that every refugee admitted to the United States last month was a white South African. In May, all 599 refugees accepted into the country came from South Africa after enduring hardships from the black supremacist government lording over their once great country. Since October 1st of 2025, the U.S. has admitted 6,668 refugees, with 6,665 of them identified as white South Africans and just 3 from Afghanistan. Trump administration made it clear this policy is aimed primarily at Afrikaners and other victims of unjust discrimination and violence in their homelands. President Trump previously lowered the annual refugee cap to 7,500, a sharp break from the Biden-era limit of 125,000 overall. Left is already attacking the policy as racist. Anything they don't like is racist. But conservatives should say plainly what the media often refuses to admit. South African farmers and Afrikaner families have faced serious threats, include farm attacks, political hostility, outrageous violence, and growing concerns over property rights and safety, including murder. America cannot take in the world, but refugee policy should be based on real persecution, national interest, and careful vetting, not globalist guilt politics. For years, Democrats opened the doors to massive refugee admissions while dismissing Christians, farmers, Western aligned communities facing violence or discrimination abroad. I'm Roger Stone. You're listening to the Stone Zone on the Red Apple Audio Networks. Don't go away because we'll be right back.
Thanks for listening to The Stone Zone with Roger Stone. You can hear The Stone Zone with Roger Stone weeknights at 8 on 77 WABC. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode, so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?